they did everything right. Went to college, got good jobs, paid off their credit cards they saved for 3 years for a down payment. And then they opened a mortgage calculator in 2026 and discovered that the house they wanted, the modest 3-bedroom, nothing special, not in a fancy neighborhood, would cost them $2,800 a month. Just the mortgage payment, before taxes, before insurance, before a single repair, and they made decent money. Together, over $110,000 a year. And they still couldn't make the numbers work. They were not alone. According to the National Association of Realtors' 2026 Generational Trends Report, first-time buyers just hit a record low. Not because people stopped wanting homes, because the gap between wanting a home and affording one has quietly become one of the largest financial chasms in American history. And today, Alex is going to show you exactly how it happened, not to make you angry, but because understanding the system is the only way to navigate it. If nobody has ever explained to you clearly why homeownership feels as impossible right now, and what that actually your futures for your financial futures, subscribe. Because this is not a simple story, and the people who understand it will make very different decisions than the people who don't. Let's establish where we actually are. Because the housing market in 2026 is not just expensive, it is structurally broken in ways that took decades to build and will take years more to unwind. The median home price in the United States right now, as of the first quarter of 2026, is $403,200. 5 years ago, that number was closer to $280,000. That is a 44% increase in 5 years. On a product that most people need to borrow money to buy, and borrowing money is also significantly more expensive than it was 5 years ago. This is the collision, not one bad thing. Two bad things happening simultaneously and compounding each other. This is why the couple at the kitchen table couldn't make it work. And this is the story nobody is telling clearly. Home prices have nearly doubled in the last decade. According to the National Association of Realtors, depending on the market, prices jumped between 27% and 80% in just the last 5 years alone. And they are not falling, not meaningfully. Cotality's chief economist described the current market as being caught in a holding pattern. Prices grew just 0.4% year over year in March 2026, which sounds like relief until you realize what it actually means. Prices are not correcting, they are simply sitting at levels that most Americans cannot afford. Here is the number that should concern you most. In 2003, the median home price was approximately 4.3 times the median household income. In 2017, it had risen to 5.1 times. Today, the ratio has climbed to nearly 6.0. The national price-to-income ratio now exceeds 5.5. That means the median American home costs more than 5.5 years of the median American salary. Before interest, before taxes, before maintenance, before a single thing goes wrong. And that ratio is not a temporary pandemic distortion anymore. It is becoming the new baseline. And for first-time buyers who don't have equity from a previous home to use as a springboard, that baseline is a wall. Part 2, the mortgage rate trap. Let's talk about the second half of the problem, because price alone does not tell the full story. In 2021, mortgage rates briefly touched 2.65% on a 30-year fixed loan. For a brief, extraordinary moment, money had almost never been cheaper to borrow. And then it ended. By 2023, rates had surged above 7%. And in 2026, despite slowly declining, they are still sitting at approximately 6.3% to 6.5%. Let's make this real with actual numbers. A $400,000 home with a 20% down payment leaving a $320,000 loan. At a 3% mortgage rate, the monthly payment is approximately $1,349. At the current 6.4% rate, that same loan costs approximately $2,000 a month. Same house, same loan amount, $651 more per month, $7,812 per year, $234,360 more over the life of the loan. That is not a minor adjustment. That is the difference between a household that can afford a home and a household that cannot. And here is the trap that nobody explains clearly. Millions of existing homeowners locked in rates below 4% between 2020 and 2022. They are sitting in homes they would consider selling if selling didn't mean giving up a 3% mortgage and replacing it with a 0.4% one. Economists call this the lock-in effect, and they estimate it has removed as many as 1.5 million potential listings from the market. People who want, who would sell, who would create supply, but who cannot afford the financial consequence of doing so. So they stay, and the market stays frozen, and the first-time buyers keep waiting. Part 3. The down payment mountain. Now add the third layer, the down payment. The median home price in Q1 2026 is $403,200. A traditional 20% down payment on that home is $80,640, not including closing costs, not including moving costs, not including the immediate repairs that most homes require. Just the down payment, $80,640. The median household income in America is roughly $74,000 per year. After taxes, housing costs, student loans, and basic living expenses, the average household saves somewhere between 5% and 8% of their income per year. That is between $3,700 and $5,920 per year. At that savings rate, saving a full 20% down payment on a median home takes between 13 and 21 years, by which point the median home price has almost certainly increased again. This is the treadmill. You save faster, the target moves further. You save harder, the finish line recedes. And meanwhile, the people who already own homes watch their equity grow, while the people who don't fall further behind. According to the NAR's 2026 report, baby boomers now account for 42% of all home purchases. First-time buyers dropped to a record low. The market is literally being inherited by the people who already want it. Part 4. The generation fracture. Here is where the story becomes something more than just a market report. This housing crisis is quietly creating two Americas, not divided by income alone, divided by when you were born and whether you bought a home before 2020. The American Enterprise Institute tracked homeownership rates from 2000 to 2022 across every age group. For 35-year-olds, homeownership dropped from 60% to 50%. For 40-year-olds, from 70% to 59%. For 50-year-olds, from 78% to 69%. Every age group declining across the entire income and age spectrum. Realtor.com economists identified approximately 1.82 million millennial and Gen Z's households that are missing, meaning these are people who would normally have formed independent households by now, but haven't. Not by choice, because the cost of entry to independent adult life, starting with a place to live, has become too high. They are living with parents, doubling up with roommates, delaying marriage, delaying children, delaying every life milestone that housing has historically made possible. This is not a statistic. This is the lived experience of an entire generation. And the longer it continues, the more entrenched the divide becomes. Part 5. The supply crisis nobody fixed, but here is the most piece miss when they talk about why housing is unaffordable. It is not just demand. It is not just rates. The foundational problem is that America stopped building enough homes decades ago, and the consequences of that decision are now being paid by people who had nothing to do with making it. Economists estimate the United States is short between 4 and 7 million homes, depending on the methodology used. That shortfall did not appear overnight. It built up through years of restrictive zoning laws, permitting delays, NIMBY opposition, and a construction industry that never fully recovered from the 2008 crash. The result? Insufficient supply chasing growing demand, which it means prices do not need to be driven by speculation to stay high. They stay high simply because not enough homes exist. And the shortage hits hardest at the bottom. Starter homes, the modest, affordable entry-level properties that previous generations used to get a first foothold in the market, have nearly disappeared from many markets. Builders stopped constructing them because larger homes have higher margins, because regulatory costs make small homes financially impractical, because the land, the permits, the labor, all cost nearly the same regardless of the home's size. So the market builds up, and the people who need in at the bottom find nothing there waiting for them. Part 6. The renting trap. So if buying is out of reach, renting is the answer, right? That sounds logical until you calculate what renting actually costs over a decade. Here is the part of this story that cuts both ways. Rent builds zero equity. Every dollar paid in rent is a dollar that creates no ownership stake, no appreciation benefit, no net worth growth. It is the cost of shelter and nothing more. A household renting a $2,000 per month apartment for 10 years spends $240,000 and owns nothing at the end of it. The Federal Reserve's data consistently shows one of the most dramatic wealth gaps in America between renters and homeowners. The median homeowner net worth is approximately $400,000. The median renter net worth is approximately $10,000. That gap is not explained by income alone. It is explained by a decade or two of home equity compounding, while renting households paid the same amount and built nothing. But here is the honest part of this analysis. Buying a home you cannot actually afford is not the solution either. A household that stretches beyond its means to buy, that takes on a mortgage payment representing 45% or 50% of their take-home income, is not building wealth. They are building financial fragility. One job loss, one medical bill, one economic shock away from everything unraveling. The trap is real in both directions, and most people are never shown both sides clearly enough to navigate it honestly. Part 7. What actually changes this? So where does this go from here? Because this video is not meant to leave you feeling hopeless. It is meant to leave you seeing clearly, and seeing clearly requires understanding what would actually have to change. There are 3 levers. The first is mortgage rates. Redfin projects the 30-year fixed rate will average approximately 6.3% for 2026, down from 6.6% in 2025. Still elevated, still painful, but directionally moving the right way. Freddie Mac forecasts modest home price growth of 2.3% for the year, which combined with wages growing faster than prices for the first time since the financial crisis, means affordability is very slowly improving. Not fixed, not restored, slowly improving. Show the timescale, years, not months. Redfin's own analysis describes what's coming as the Great Housing Reset. Not a crash, not a sudden correction, but a years-long period of gradual normalization. They estimate it will take approximately 5 years for the housing market to return to something resembling balance. 5 years, which means the decisions you make in the next 12 to 24 months will happen in the context of a market that is still broken, but beginning, slowly, to heal. The supply lever is the most important and the hardest. Zoning reform, permitting simplification, starter home incentives. Some of this is beginning to move at the state and federal level, but nobody should expect it to move fast. These are political problems with decades of inertia behind them. The third lever is your individual financial position, and this is the only one you can actually control. Part 8. The Navigation Strategy. Here is what smart navigation looks like in this market. Not panic buying, not paralyzed waiting, not emotional decision-making. Clear, honest math. The honest affordability threshold. The one that protects your financial stability rather than just getting you into a house. Is a mortgage payment no higher than 28% of your gross monthly income? On a $90,000 household income, that is approximately $100 per month. At a 6.4% rate, that payment supports a loan of roughly $330,000. With a 10% down payment, that means a home purchase price of approximately $366,000. That is the honest number for that income, not the number the bank will approve, not the number the real estate agent suggests. The number that lets you own a home without the home owning you. The second part of smart navigation is geography. The national median masks enormous variation. The national price-to-income ratio exceeds 5.5, but in markets like Birmingham, Alabama, the ratio is 3.2. In Wichita, Kansas, median home prices are under $250,000. In Cincinnati, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and St. Louis, first-time buyers can still find entry points that make the math work. This does not mean everyone can or should relocate. But for the households with flexibility, the opportunity cost of staying in the most expensive markets is measured in decades of homeownership delayed. And the third piece is the one most first-time buyers never explore thoroughly enough. Down payment assistance programs. State, county, and federal programs, many of which remain dramatically underutilized, can provide grants, forgivable loans, or significantly reduced down payment requirements. The 20% down payment is not a law. It is a guideline. And for buyers who qualify, FHA loans, VA loans, USDA loans, state assistance programs can create entry points that the standard market narrative never mentions. They sat at that kitchen table for a long time, running numbers that didn't work, feeling like they had failed a test they hadn't been taught to study for. But here is the thing about the housing crisis of 2026. It is real, it is structural, it is genuinely difficult, and it is also not the end of the story. The most dangerous response to a broken market is to let desperation make the decision. To buy beyond your means because the fear of being left behind feels worse than the math of the payment. That fear is real, but the math is permanent. The households that navigate this era well are not the ones who found a miracle. They are the ones who understood the system clearly enough to stop fighting it emotionally and start working it strategically. The right market, the right timeline, the right financial position, built patiently, in a moment that demands patience from a system that was never designed to be patient with them. The dangerous part of this housing crisis is not that homeownership feels impossible. It is that the feeling of impossibility can become an excuse to stop calculating, when calculation is the only thing that actually leads anywhere worth going.